First thing we will be discussing is equipment preparation. Your new softener may or may not have the media in the tank. It will depend on the size of the softener and where it was shipped from. If your softener does not have the media in the tank, it will come with the unit in separate boxes. If your unit has the media in the tank, please move to the next step. To install the media in your new water softener tank, you will remove the control valve by turning it counterclockwise. Do not use tools to remove the valve. The valve can be broken with the use of channel locks or pipe wrenches. When the valve is removed, you will need to check the inner distributor tube. The distributor tube will be secured in the bottom of the tank. You will need to make sure that it is secured in the tank before installing the media. You can do this by placing your thumb in the tube and grasping it with your hand. You should be able to lift the tank without pulling the tube out of the tank. Once it is confirmed secure, you will need to put duct tape over the tube to prevent media from getting into the tube during the fill procedure. With the tape in place, install a supplied funnel and start to pour the media in the tank. You will put all the media that was sent to you in the tank. Typically, the media will fill the tank to approximately 50 to 60%. If you receive gravel with your unit, you will pour the gravel in first and then the softening resin. Once the tank is filled with media, rinse the threads on the tank. Remove the duct tape and apply food-grade silicone grease to the distributor tube and the control valve threads and O-rings. Confirm the basket is in place on the bottom of the control valve. Put the control valve back on the unit, confirming that the distributor tube is in the center of the strainer basket on the bottom of the valve. Fit the valve on the tank and turn it clockwise to start the threads. You will tighten the valve hand tight and then give it a couple taps with the palm of your hand to tighten it further. It doesn't need to be really tight because the O-ring will seal the tank and not the threads. Now that the tank is filled with media and the control valve is in place, we will move to the next step, which will be connecting the water softener to your plumbing system. Make sure the unit is in place and on level ground. Shut off the main water supply and relieve the pressure at a sink or a garden spigot. On the top of the bypass valve, there are arrows painted on the stainless steel bypass that show the direction of flow. The arrow pointing toward the unit will be the inlet. The arrow pointing away from the unit will be the outlet. Be sure you connect the unit to your plumbing system properly. Make sure the bypass is in the bypass position. When the bypass valve is in the bypass position, the bypass valve handle pointer will be pointing to bypass. The bypass valve will have 1-inch Pt2 female threads. When the piping is attached and the unit is in bypass, turn on the water supply and check for leaks at the plumbing and bypass. If there are leaks, repair them now. If you don't have any leaks, we can move to the next step. Next, we will be connecting the brine tank or the salt tank. On the side of the control valve, there's a 3/8 compression fitting that is used to connect the brine tank. There is a brass compression nut and a plastic sleeve. Take the nut and sleeve off the valve, slide the nut and sleeve over the 3/8 line that is supplied with the unit. There will be 2 brass inserts in the supplied brine line, shipped with the new unit. Insert the brine line in the valve, tighten the nut on the fitting as tight as you can by hand. You can use pliers to snug it further, but don't tighten it more than half a turn past hand tight. Now you need to connect the brine line to the brine tank. Take the lid off the brine tank, take the cap off the white tube in the brine tank. Inside the white tube there is an elbow connection for the 3/8 line. Remove the nut. There will be 2 sleeves in the nut. There is a white plastic split ring and a black plastic sleeve. Now feed the 3/8 line through the hole in the side of the brine tank in the white tube. Install the nut, the white plastic split sleeve, and then the black plastic sleeve. The brine line will have a brass insert already in the 3/8 line. Insert the line with the insert, nut and sleeves in the fitting and tighten the nut. Tighten the nut hand tight and use pliers to turn it an additional half turn. It is important that this line be securely tightened. If there ever is a high level of water in the brine tank, this line being loose would be the first thing to check. Put the cap back on the white tube. Now the brine tank is connected. Lastly, you will hook up the drain line to the control valve at the drain line elbow. You can use the hose barb fitting on the valve with a clamp to connect the drain line. This is a 5/8 inch tubing and it can be purchased on our website under softening parts. Be sure the clamp is tight. The drain line can be installed overhead to a standpipe or to a floor drain. Make sure the drain line is secured because it will drain with force and it will be under pressure. Fill the brine tank with salt. If you don't want to fill the tank, you should at least put in 4 50-pound bags. You would want to use 99.8% solar salt, preferably the extra coarse grade and not the pellets. A side note to this, do not keep the brine tank full of salt. In other words, don't continually top it off. Fill it and let it run down to where you can see the water. This could be several months or nearly a year depending on the water quality and the amount used. This will ensure that the salt will be used regularly and will not form a solid block that water cannot pass through. Your system is now installed and ready for the internal settings to be programmed. When programming the softener, it's a good idea to write down the settings you put in so you'll have that information for future reference. First, plug the transformer into a 110 volt outlet. The display will show the time and it will be flashing. There are 3 buttons on the control pad. There is an up and a down arrow and an extra cycle button. With the time flashing, hold the up or down arrow until the time begins to change. You will see TD on the screen. This is referring to time of day, which is what we are setting. For now, we will set the time to 12:01 p.m. This will allow us to get to the master programming mode. When the softener is set at 12:01 p.m., press the extra cycle button and this will hold the time at 12:01 p.m. Now hold the up and down arrows at the same time until you see the program icon replaces the service icon and the display format screen appears. The first parameter that will appear is the display format. This will be set to GAL for gallons. You can change this using the up and down arrows and then press the extra cycle button to save the settings and move to the next parameter. The next parameter will be the valve type, or VT. For a single tank system on city water, you will use DF1B for standard downflow single backwash. The next parameter to appear will be the control type, or CT. You will set your softener to FD for meter delay. This will delay the regeneration until 2 a.m. on the day the gallon capacity of the softener is reached. You can change this using the up and down arrows and then press the extra cycle button to save the setting and move to the next parameter. The next parameter to appear will be number of tanks, or NT. You will set this to 1 for one single tank. You can change this using the up and down arrows and then press the extra cycle button to save the setting and move to the next parameter. The next parameter to appear will be the unit capacity, or C. You will set this using the following info. Typically, a medium salt setting will work for most applications. If you want to use the high salt setting, it will work for all applications. The low salt setting should only be used if the hardness level is very low. If you can't decide what salt setting to use, contact one of our certified water specialists at US Water Systems. The value for this parameter is times 1000. So for a 53,000 grain softener with a medium salt setting, we will use 37,000 as the value. So it will be displayed as 37 times 1000. You can change this using the up and down arrows and then press the extra cycle button to save the parameter and move to the next step. The next parameter that will appear is hardness, or H. You will set the hardness level to 5 grains per gallon, higher than the previously collected test value. So if your actual hardness is 20 grains per gallon, you will set this at 25 grains per gallon. If you have iron, you will multiply your value in ppm, or milligram per liter, by 4 and add it to the hardness. This is called compensated hardness. For example, the hardness is 20 grains per gallon and the iron is 1.5 parts per million, or milligrams per liter. So 1.5 times 4 equals 6. 20 plus 6 equals 26 grains per gallon. 26 grains per gallon plus the 5 grains per gallon cushion will give you a compensated hardness of 31 grains per gallon. You can change this using the up and down arrows, press the extra cycle button to save the setting and move to the next parameter. The next parameter to appear will be the reserve selection, or RS. You will set this to SF for safety factor. You can change this using the up and down arrows. Press the extra cycle button to save the setting and move to the next parameter. The next parameter to appear will be safety factor, or SF. You will need to add 10% for each person in the family. Example, if you have 5 people in your family, you will set the unit to 50% safety factor. This will ensure that the system will regenerate before you run out of soft water. You can change this using the up and down arrows, then press the extra cycle button to save the setting and move to the next parameter. The next parameter that will appear is the daily override, or DO. You will set this to 10 days, or 10. This will ensure that the softener regenerates if the gallon capacity hasn't been reached within 10 days. You can change this using the up and down arrows, then press the extra cycle button to save the setting and move to the next parameter. The next parameter that will appear is regeneration time, or RT. You will leave this at 2 a.m. unless you are up at night and want the softener to regenerate while you are sleeping. If this is the case, set the regeneration time to 2 hours past your bedtime. You can change this using the up and down arrows, then press the extra cycle button to save the setting and move to the next parameter. The next parameter that will appear are the regeneration cycles, or BD, BF, BW, RR, or SV. Use the extra cycle button to cycle through these parameters. When you get to the BF, or brine fill, you will put the number of minutes that corresponds to the capacity and salt setting you decided to use from the previous table. Since we used a medium salt setting for our 53,000 grain unit, the capacity was set at 37,000 grains. And we will need to set the brine fill time to 10 minutes. You can change this using the up and down arrows, then press the extra cycle button to save the setting and move to the next parameter. You will not change the other regeneration cycle times. They are factory set to the correct settings for most applications. Specific applications may require some of the other parameters to be changed. If you're unsure about this, you can contact one of our certified water specialists at U.S. Water Systems. The next parameter that will appear will be flow meter type, or FM. You will use the T0.7 for Fleck 3/4 inch turbine meter. This is factory set and shouldn't be changed. Press the extra cycle button to save the setting and move back to the service mode. Rarely, you will need to reset the clock if the power is off for a long period of time, but the other settings are typically saved by the supercapacitor. Your unit's parameters are now set and you are ready to start up the system. Now that the system is installed and set, you will need to go through the startup process. You will need to fill and flush your new softener. With the bypass valve in the bypass position, press and hold the extra cycle button until you hear the motor in the valve begin to turn. Once the motor stops turning, the display will show a regeneration parameter and it will begin to count down. Press the extra cycle button again and the motor will move again. You will continue to do this until RR, or rapid rinse parameter, appears. When the motor stops in rapid rinse and the time begins to count down, we will start to fill the water softener with water. We will do this by slowly opening the bypass valve. We will just need to crack the bypass valve open and slowly fill the tank. You will watch the drain to determine that the air is out of the tank and the water is running clear. You will slowly open the valve until it is completely open and the drain is running clear with no air. You can slowly open the valve over the entire rinse cycle. Once the drain is running clear, you can open the bypass valve completely. When the time on the rinse cycle goes down to 0, the valve will automatically move to the next parameter, which will be the brine fill cycle. Let the valve run its course and do not hit any other buttons. In the brine fill mode, the unit will fill the brine tank with water so there will be a concentrated salt solution for the unit's first regeneration. When the brine fill cycle is complete, the valve will move back to the time of day and your unit is now online and ready for operation. Now set the time of day to the actual time where you live. This can be done by holding the up or down arrow until the time begins to change. You will see TD on the screen, which stands for time of day. We will set the time of day to the actual time where you live. When the softener is set to the actual time, press the extra cycle button to hold the setting. Your unit will regenerate automatically going forward and shouldn't need attention unless there is a power outage. If the drain didn't run completely clear, you can open up a spigot or a bathtub faucet for additional rinsing. If you see pieces of the media coming from the drain during the initial rinse, stop the process because there may be an internal problem. If this is the case, call one of our customer service representatives for further instructions. Now I would like to explain some of the features of your new water softener. When the water in your home is running, the softener icon, which is displayed as a water spigot, will blink, indicating that the unit is counting gallons of water going through it. This feature can be used to determine if there is a leak in your plumbing system, such as a toilet valve that is seeping. The time of day will change periodically to a gallons capacity screen and then return to the time of day. The gallons capacity screen is indicating how many gallons are left before the next regeneration. To manually regenerate your softener, you can press the extra cycle button and release. This will trigger the unit to regenerate that night at 2 a.m. or whatever regeneration time you selected. You will see the service icon blink. This indicates that the softener will regenerate at 2 a.m. If you press and hold the extra cycle button, the unit will regenerate immediately. If you do an immediate regeneration, you shouldn't use water during this time period. Your system will collect user data every day that it is in service and will hold the history for diagnostics. One last thing to know is that when you run your system out of salt, you will fill the brine tank with salt and then manually regenerate your unit for 2 days in a row to ensure that it is flushed and totally regenerated for future use. You can do this by pressing the extra cycle button and releasing it so it will regenerate at 2 a.m. that night, and then the next day press and release the button again so it will regenerate the second night at 2 a.m. This generally will get your unit back to ground zero and it will be ready to work automatically again. This concludes this series of videos for the U.S. Water Systems Fusion Water Softener installation and setup. If you have any other questions or concerns, please call one of our certified water specialists at 1-800-608-USWA. The only thing left to do now is to enjoy your soft water.